Okay, the first thing I want to review with you today is one of those things on my top 20 most important topics that you need to know how to do, and that would be this guy right here. Write an equation for having 2 points. Well, the first thing you want to do is find the slope. All right, so hopefully you've already done this because I started you off before I started the recording. You should have been taking this minus this, which, just a second, let me change my ink size here. That's pretty big. There we go. Is going to be, let's see, negative 6 minus 8 over that minus that. Careful with the negatives. 1 minus negative 1. So that makes negative 14 over positive 1, which makes negative 14. Okay, hold on. Minus minus means plus. You are correct. Thank you. Something's not working well with my brain today, so kind of massive headache between last hour and this hour. I'm probably having a stroke, so just in case I started really like slurring my words, all you have to do is go over to that button on the wall there and press the button and say help. All right. So anyway, because I didn't even know that 14 divided by 2 is 7, so final answer, negative 7. Okay, would you agree that that's the slope? All right, so I'm now going to be writing the equation y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Do you remember that one? If you don't, you need to remember that one. It's going to be coming up today, and that's one of the reasons I put it on the top 20, because these are things that we wish you knew really well coming into this class. And we know there's reality, and then there's what we wish. Well, this would be one of those things where you can fix yourself so that you do know all 20 of them by the time you hit them and realize that they're important. Hopefully you'll already know them. Now I'm going to pick one of my 2 points. I'm going to choose this one, and I'm going to write in something smaller because that's ridiculously large ink. The x of it's negative 1, so I'm going to put a negative 1 right there. The y of it's 8, so I'm going to put an 8 right there. Final answer, y minus 8 equals negative 7, parentheses, x minus minus 1 means plus 1. And there it is. You can leave it just like that. A lot of people are like, but don't you have to solve for y? No, don't have to. It's a perfectly good equation just the way it is. And in fact, that happens in calc too. And the kids still think they have to solve it. And then if you do make a mistake in solving it, they'll mark it wrong. But if you would have left it that way, it'd have been all right. So you risk a lot by solving it for y. You can do it, but it's kind of a risky waste of time. All right. So that's one of the topics in the top 20. Are there any others that are on the screen right now that you're not good at and therefore would like me to talk about and make sure you understand these? Because you are eventually, within the next few weeks, going to be tested on these. And they'll be entered as a test, just like any other test. Okay, so you need to know these top 20 things. It could either help your grade. Really, it should help your grade. They're all basic algebra stuff. But there was a lot of kids that came in with starting with like 4s or 5s out of 20 on this thing. If you haven't improved yourself a lot already, I'd be surprised. But I'd be really sad if you didn't learn them now in the next 2 weeks. Because, hey, I'm trying to give you an easy test in here and make you learn your basics. Okay, are there any of these topics that you'd like to go over? I can scroll up or down, which way you want to go. Up, okay, so you want to see problems that are higher, is that what you're saying? Okay. One like 12, okay. What I want to do is not do actually problem 12, but I want to do one like problem 12. I'll try to remember that. Okay. Number 12, that's something like this. 6 plus or minus the square root of 8 all over 12. On this kind of problem, everybody please start this by, everybody do this with me, start this by simplifying that square root of 8. If you don't know how, we've identified one of your problems. Square root of 8 can be simplified. One of the things I'm proud of on this top 20 sheet is that each problem usually has 2 things you have to know built into it. So it's really the top 40, really. Because to be able to do this one, you really need to know 2 things. You need to know how to simplify complicated things, and you also need to know how to take square roots and break them down. Okay, in case you forgot, this is done by going square root of, instead of square root of 8, I go square root of, and that's a funny way to fake a 4. Square root of 4 times the square root of 2. That makes the square root of 8. And why do I do that? Because now I have a nice whole number out in front, 2 root 2. Because the square root of 4 is 2. And now why did I do that? Because now there's a number in common here and here and here. And if there's a number in everything, you can always cancel it. So I can say, oh, 2 goes into all of them. 2 goes in here 3 times. 2 goes in here once. And 2 goes in here 6 times. Final answer, 3 plus or minus root 2 all over 6. How many of you could have done that by yourself? All right, so let's try another one like it. 8 plus or minus the square root of 32 all over 4. My first thought is simplify the square root of 32. In case you're having trouble with this one, I'd recommend 16 times 2. You can do 4 and 8, but then you have to break the 8 down into 4 and 2. So it's probably smartest to go with 16 times 2. And that, of course, becomes 4 root 2. And then, hopefully you knew to cancel some stuff. Hopefully you notice. Oh, this 8. 4 goes into everything, so 4 goes in there twice. 4 goes in here once, and 4 goes in here twice. No, wait a minute, 4 goes into 4 once, sorry. And then I got 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And I could put all over 1, but I don't need to. Dividing by 1 doesn't really do anything, right? How many of you had that? Raise your hand if you did. All right, I'm up to about half the class. All right, let's go with one more. Let's go with 12 plus or minus the square root of 50 all over, let me think, 15. And wait, I have to change this, change the 12 to a 20, sorry. 20 plus or minus root 50 all over 15. This is an important skill. Why? Is it just because we like to randomly put square roots in problems? No. Do you know where this comes from? This is what you have every time after you do the most famous formula in the world, the quadratic formula. Although I have to say that I'm probably wrong on the most famous part. The most famous is probably a squared plus b squared equals c squared, because even Homer Simpson is quoted in The Simpsons saying a squared plus b squared equals c squared. All right, this one I hope you thought of 25. Yeah, I'm losing it. 25 adding 2, that's 5 root 2. That's the easy part. And this next part isn't that bad either. Just got to go, what goes into all of them? What goes into all of them? 5. 5 goes in here 4 times, 5 goes in here once, and 5 goes in here 3 times. 4 plus or minus root 2. You can put a 1 in front, don't have to. All over 3. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Pretty much everybody. Okay, not everybody, but maybe some people are just being rebels and not raising their hands. All right, so there's another kind I was asked to do, and that's this kind on the top 20. Would you know what to do if it said this? How do you get that solved? It really comes down to either you're going to have to do a whole bunch of awful fraction problems, or there's a simple way to clear the fractions. Does anybody know what to do? Multiply everything by what? Well, how about this? Do you agree that if I multiply by 2, it would fix my first problem, my first denominator? I could multiply everything through by 2, but then that wouldn't fix the 5. I could multiply everything by 5, but then that wouldn't fix the 2. You multiply everything by 10, but you do it in a special way. You multiply by everything by 5 times 2. Watch. And the calc teachers have specifically asked us to show you this so that you are good at canceling fractions, because it happens in calc all the time. You have these big nasty fractions in the middle of your calc. And if you can just clear them, life is so much easier. Watch what happens now when I multiply by that common denominator. This 2 cancels this 2. This 5 cancels this 5. And this is just a big number to multiply. 5 times 2 is 10, times 2 is 20. Back over to here, I have 5 times 1a, and that's just 5a, plus 2 times 3 is 6. And now isn't that a baby equation from there? Subtract 6, divide by 5. Isn't that a bit easy from there? So all I had to do was that one thing, and it turned it into a really simple equation. Okay. So again, in case you're not get what I mean, to finish it, you go like this. 5a equals 14, a equals 14 fifths. Okay, so let's try another one like that. 3/4 m plus 2/3 equals 1. Should be really quick and easy to solve if you know this trick. Clear those fractions. Give this one a shot. Stick to this one for now. Do you get to what to multiply by here? Not 5 halves. I multiplied by 5 times 2. I'm going to multiply this time by 4 times 3. And some people say, why didn't you just multiply by 12? Because then I'd have to factor it all out again to see what I get when things cancel. This makes it cancel so nicely. Cancel, 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 cancel. Another thing over there cancels, it's just 12. And then back to here, 9m plus 8. And then from there, it's a baby equation. Subtract 8, divide by 9, done. Any questions about what I just did there? How many of you think you can get one right like that now? Okay, good. Are there any other topics off of that top 20 that you think you might still have a little trouble with? Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll scroll down a little bit. Number 8, like this kind right there. All right, so you have numbers and variables that are all in a big fraction. The key there is it's all about canceling. So if I had, for instance, 4x to the 3rd, y to the 5th, all over 16x to the 2nd, y to the 7th, it's all about canceling, and in this case, like so many other times in math, you just have to divide it out into little parts and do it little piece by piece. Can you simplify this part for me? Because the numbers can only go with numbers. You can't simplify a 4 and an x. They can't go together. But I can take a 4 and a 16 and simplify that. What's that make? 1/4. Next, I'm going to simplify my x's. Only the x's can go with other x's, and so what does that part make? Well, think of it as xxx on top. That's what that means. Over there's an xx on the bottom. Do you get the 2 of them can cancel? 2 out of the 3 can cancel. Cancel and cancel. So there's 1 x left, and it's where? On the top. Now, if you'd rather do that by saying, when you are dividing fractions, or no, when you're dividing powers, you subtract the 2 powers and say x to the 3 minus 2 power. That works too. All right, last part, this part right here, the y's can go together. How many y's are left, and where are they? 2 y's left on the bottom, so y squared on the bottom. So there's your final answer. 1/4, or I actually should say it this way, x over 4y squared. All right. That, judging by your reactions, that was not as easy for you as I thought it was going to be. So let's try one more like this. 6x to the 5th y all over 18x y to the 10th. Simplify that one. If you know, once you understand it, it's like zip, zip. That should be, go right to the answer and just write it down. Like, oh, obviously, the numbers cancel out and become this. The x's become that. The y's become that. Okay, hopefully you said 6 goes into both of those. 6 goes in here once, 6 goes in there 3 times, so 1/3 is how you start. Raise your hand if you had the numbers part right. Okay, good. Next part is the x's. There's one will cancel, so there's still a lot of x's left on the top. X to the fourth. And then the last thing is the y's. Only one of them will cancel, so there's a lot of y's left on the bottom. Y to the... Raise your hand if you had that one right. Good. Okay. Any other topics off the top 20 that you want to chat about quick before I assign it and a few other things for tonight's homework? Any of those things that you wouldn't really remember how to do? Thinking maybe one more, but if you don't have another, that's all right. You can always ask me personally one-on-one during work time. All right, I'm not going to make you give me another question there. So I do have plenty of time left to explain just a few things that are on today's homework. We are starting a new chapter, I guess you'd say. We're in 2.1 now, and thankfully it's a really easy day. The first part is just recognizing what a polynomial is. So if I have, we usually have x's in them. If I have something like this is just your typical polynomial. Poly means many, nomial means like parts, and so this says many parts. It's got 3 parts specifically. It's a trinomial. But polynomials can have any number of parts. You can have them really big and have like a big number up in front here. But usually you put them in order where the powers descend like this. This has a power of 1, and this does like imaginary x to the 0 on it, because that's like 1. So anyway, they're always written in that order. This would be a 1, 2, 3, 4 part, which would be called a quadnomial. We aren't going to test you on that, but this polynomials have lots of parts to them, lots of terms. Each of those little things is called a term. And the last thing I need to tell you about is that polynomials cannot have negatives or fractions in their powers. So for instance, if you have 3x to the 1/2, if you're smart enough to know that x to the 1/2 means the square root of x, that's impressive. You should know that by the end of this class, but if you haven't already gotten this before, to the 1/2 power means square root. So what is the answer to this? 3. And that's as simple as that. If you try it on a calculator, you can prove it to yourself. To the 1/2 power means square root. So what they're really saying by saying you can't have fractions in your powers is you can't have square roots in them. They're not polynomials if they have square roots in them. All right, the other thing you can't have is negative powers. I don't know if you remember what a negative power does. If I have x to the negative 3rd, do you know that that's the same as 1 over x to the 3rd? If you didn't know that, know it now. If you have a negative exponent, it does not make the answer negative. It makes the answer flip. So if I had 5x to the negative 7th, a lot of people think that the whole thing flips. It's not. Just the x does. So it becomes 5 over x to the positive 7. Maybe you remember this from higher algebra. Sometimes we did it this way. We said, these aren't happy up there. They're negative. They're unhappy. So we move them down to the bottom and they become happy. This become x to the 7th on the bottom, not a negative x to the negative 7th on the top. All right, so if you understood what I just tried to explain there, you should be able to tell me what this is equal to. 1/8 is correct. Good. It means 1 over 8 to the 1. All right, so then how about this? 8 to the negative 2. Do it in parts, like all math. Just do the squared. What's that? 8 squared is 64. So how about 8 to the negative 2? 1 over 64. You getting that the negative just puts 1 over it? It puts that number down in the basement, down into the denominator. All right, so when you have a polynomial that's written like this, we're going to give you all kinds of weird ones. What you need to look out for is this. That one is not a polynomial. Why? Has a negative power. Done. Okay, what other kind of powers did I say you couldn't have? Fraction powers. So if I'd have thrown in, made that positive, but then I'd have thrown in a x to the 1/2, that means that there's a square root in this problem, and that's not allowed. Okay, so those are not polynomials if they have negatives or fraction powers. Yes? That's correct. All we're identifying is that they're a polynomial or they're not a polynomial. Yes? Oh, you mean to the power of 1/3? Very good. So if I said 8 to the 1/3 power, what do you think the answer is? 2, you got it. Because it means the exact same thing as if they said that. And that means what times what times what makes 8? And the answer is 2. No, we were just saying that an exception when if you aren't a polynomial because you've got this fraction power, you can't have fraction powers if you're going to be a polynomial. But it's not like fraction powers don't exist. So somebody was asking me, well, what would the 1/3 power be? And that would be cube root. So fraction powers do exist, and you're going to have to, by later in this unit, be able to understand what the heck that is. You'll be able to have to do that. It's not that hard. I'm going to make it a number that you could do in your head, and I'll show you. 125 to the 2/3 power. Well, the 1/3 part of it, you know, the root part of it there, that means the cube root. What's the cube root of 125? 5. And then this just plain, and when it's on the top, it just means squared, just like normal. So then that would be 5, and then you square it, so the answer would be 25. I'm not teaching you that today to do. But the point is, if you have a fraction power, it is not a polynomial. Okay. Next part of your little worksheet asks you about, given that f of 1 equals 8 and f of 3 equals 12, then what is the equation for the line that goes through those? And all it really means is they just gave you 2 points, didn't they? 1, 8 and 3, 12. And I've already reminded you how to find the equation for that. You find slope, then you use this thing. These are on your next test. So make sure you know how to use this. It's not just me wanting you to know your basics. It's on the test, so know it. All right, so what if they say this? F of -3 equals 12 and f of 2 equals 9. Then they just gave you 2 points. -3, 12 and 2, 9. And then you find the slope and use that formula and get an equation for it. All right, so since I've already taught that before, we won't take any more time on that. The last part is just simple. If they're going to ask you to see if you recognize what this would be. If I were to just have a sketch up here, could you tell me if this could possibly be right? Could that sketch possibly be right? No. What rules it out? That -8. That -8 means that thing should have moved where? Down 8. Okay, so now if I try again and say, all right, how about that? Could that possibly be it? No, because there's, what would this one have to have? That would have to have a flip in it. Yeah, and there's no flip in that, so that can't be right. Okay, so then maybe, could this possibly be it? Depending on the scale and everything, did it move? Is mine left? Yeah. Is mine down? And is mine stretched a little bit? Kind of depends on the scale, but yeah, that could be it. That's all you're going to ask you to do in the last section is use your function knowledge, and you guys generally are really good at that. So you should be okay on that part. All right, so that's the new stuff for today. I'm done with the video, but next I'm going to hand back your tests. Okay, I just realized there's one more topic that before I end here that I did not explain, and it's if it is a polynomial, they're going to ask you what's its degree and leading coefficient. So let's say I give you one like this. First of all, is it a polynomial or not? No, it's not. So I just say no, and it's because of that negative in the exponent. But now I erased the negative. Now it's a polynomial. And so what's its degree? Yep, it's the highest power. And if this had had an x squared on it, would that change my degree? No, you do not add them up. You just pick the biggest one. Okay? So the biggest one is the degree. This would still be degree 3. If I were to add one at the end, it's like 8 x to the 7th, that's kind of cheating because we normally put them in order from biggest to smallest, but that all of a sudden becomes the degree. And then the leading coefficient is now the 8. The leading coefficient is the number on that biggest degree. Okay, so up until I put that down, like on this one, the degree would have been 3 and the lead coefficient would have been 2. But as soon as I add on something else like 8x to the 7th, then that's all of a sudden becomes my degree is 7, and that's my lead coefficient. Okay, after that little add-on, I'm really done.